Let me know if that worked.
Yep. All
That was
right.
recording. Okay, awesome. All
Perfect.
right.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
I guess we can just jump right into it then.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's jump right in.
Okay. So, when was Boston College's mental health department started?
The first year for sports counseling was the last academic year. So that was 2021. And it was a pilot program at the time. So I was in the master's program, and there was another student as well. We were both interns, master's level interns with BC Sports Counseling. There's a supervisor too, a clinical supervisor who's contracted and works with the clinic. And then my position was a new position I was hired into for this year. So it's kind of like year two, although I tend to say like it was kind of a pilot year last year since there weren't any employees yet. And then so this year is more like year one of it being in an official department, if that makes sense.
Um, what was like the original goal for the starting the department?
I know that there was a push from staff, a lot of coaches looking for mental health services specific for student athletes. Seeing as there's some unique challenges to being an athlete that sort of sets you apart from um, other students on campus. So our task was to provide counseling services, individual counseling services, and then eventually group workshops for student athletes. Um, and then we're kind of growing each year to try to encompass even more. University counseling services, which is available to any student at BC, is obviously a much larger operation, and they exist in a kind of an entirely separate place in the university. They're not associated with university health services at all. So I think that was the other hope, was that by having our clinic kind of exist within university health services, that it would be easier when necessary to collaborate with other providers, to be able to coordinate care, if that makes sense.
What are the steps that are taken to help athletes that come and ask for help?
The first thing is, to respond to requests. We have consultation meetings, which is really just an initial session to talk about what's been going on, and then to talk a little bit about what could help. 90%, maybe 80% of what we do is individual counseling. Maybe I would guess that about half of that is more short-term work where we meet with somebody, 3 to 5 times. And then the other half is, more long-term work where, somebody may be meeting, throughout the year or throughout the semester with us, with a counselor to address, the mental health concerns that they came in with. And then there's other pieces to it. There are times where we do refer out to other clinicians or to prescribers for medication, or for neuropsych testing. That's something else that we would refer out to. And there are other resources on campus that we can sometimes connect people with. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Really, I mean, it's really almost entirely kind of what you experienced.
Yeah.
That's really, and I guess our hope is that as the clinic grows and the staff, we hire more staff, then we'd be able to maybe provide other services as well. But for now, that's kind of what we're doing. And I guess to add to that, we've been able to directly serve maybe 100 and between 120 and 130 student athletes. And that's just with a staff of one plus two part-time interns. So I guess the service is being utilized, highly utilized, I would say. And I guess that's kind of I'm adding that on to the question, but hopefully that's helpful too.
Just kind of going off that, do you know
Yeah.
how many of those 120, 130 are freshman athletes?
Oh
Right.
gosh, I would have to. I mean, I could give you a guess. That is a good question. I can look. Let me look at my records here before I just take a wild guess. Because I do keep track of the academic year for people.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. I feel like my best guess is that it's right around 20 to 30%, to be honest. We have quite a it's pretty it's pretty widespread, from graduate students on down to freshmen. And maybe for a while, maybe in the fall semester there is a larger percentage of freshman student athletes who reach out. There are a lot of people who experience adjustment disorders of various types, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that's if anything, that's been more, we've seen more of that because of people who were recruited during the pandemic and were kind of going from virtual school in high school and with their sport in high school to coming on campus. If anything, that adjustment is even more difficult than it might otherwise be. But yeah, I guess overall it's kind of pretty evenly distributed if I had to guess. I'm sorry I haven't really crunched the numbers on a lot of that stuff yet, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it does. What percentage of athletes that you work with are coming to you with like on-field issues versus off-field issues? Or is it pretty even?
What I've noticed is that a lot of people who come in with an on-field issue, or vice versa, they come in with an off-field issue, it becomes apparent pretty quickly that it all is intertwined. That maybe somebody's been frustrated on the field, and that's where we start out. And then once you kind of spend a little time, you realize like there's obviously other things that are kind of maybe causing that or contributing to that. And it goes the other way too. Sometimes people may come in with relational struggle or just more generalized anxiety. And then there are obviously ways where those mental health problems can affect your on-field performance. We are mental health counseling. So there is a slight difference. Sports psychology, which some people have experience with, is like a very narrow focus, kind of zeroed in on like on-field performance. It's not a holistic way of looking at things, but it's very hyper-focused. And sometimes, there are times when we talk about, maybe going to find a specialist for somebody who, might, be better served by like a sports psychologist. Because obviously like our approach is very holistic and focused on mental health and well-being across, every facet of a student's life, and athletics is a big piece of it. But I guess like if that makes sense, that's how I try to explain it, because it's very honestly, it's even a little confusing to me. Like, well, what's the difference? Because I work with a lot of people that have performance issues related to performance, struggles related to performance. It's that's no surprise to you. Like that's very common, right? But we do kind of we do focus on the entire person and on their mental health overall. Yeah, so I mean it's an interesting thing because I think the field is still kind of catching up. Like the approach that we're taking has become much more common in universities across the country than it was 10 years ago. Um, I think 10 years ago it was a lot like there was just like sports psych, or you went wherever anyone else might go for help if you were struggling. Um, yeah, so it's I think it's definitely changing. It's kind of like there are so many different sorts of providers, and and a lot of it can be really helpful. It's kind of about figuring out where what's going to be the best fit for a person, based on what's going on and what their experience is.
Okay. How often in your meetings with athletes do you discuss academic stress? How often has that come up?
Very often.
Yeah.
um, Definitely more than half the time. And it doesn't even necessarily all fall into like all this does happen for a lot of people. It's not necessarily someone who's struggling academically, is falling behind, is having, struggling with grades, that sort of thing. It can be very high performing, you know, students academically, and what that kind of demands from them, and the stress that accompanies that when you're performing at a high level academically and athletically. That can be a really tough thing to take on. Yeah, I think 2/3 of the time at least is we touch on it. um, Especially with students that I meet with for over a longer period of time. It almost always comes up in some way.
Okay. Um, why did BC decide to have the partnerships with the Com app and Talkspace? And when did those start? And what was the thinking behind that?
I don't think I know when those partnerships started. They were in place when I know they've been in place like before this year. Um, and I don't think I really know exactly why or what the thought process was. I mean, I know it goes back to wanting to provide more resources, to support the mental health of student athletes, in particular. Um, but yeah, I that was kind of I don't have unfortunately a lot of information on how that happened, or like what was the process to like arriving at that. I think I've seen that it's helpful for some people, and I kind of get the feeling like that some people that maybe don't take advantage of our service, can use,
Yeah.
Talkspace maybe as a better fit for them. Um, there have been a few times where I've met with people, in a consultation, and we've talked about that. And I guess I don't want to dismiss it, but I guess for a lot of I think I would say for a lot of the people that I meet with, it's not really enough, or it's not like the kind of help that they're looking for, if that makes sense. A lot of people like don't really want to be on their phone more. I think it's not everybody, but I think a lot of people who are like in a bad place sort of realize for them like that being on their phone isn't helpful, and like so the idea of like, well, there's this great app and maybe it's really great and helpful for some people is just like not right for them. um but yeah, I don't want to be too critical because I do think that there's definitely a lot of good that probably can come from that, and it's nice that you don't have to pay for it, because I don't know what the call map costs, but it's like it's kind of a lot of money.
Yeah.
you know and yeah, so unfortunately I don't have a ton more to like. I don't really know how that all happens, to be honest.
Yeah. That's pretty much all I had. But Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, if there's a follow up or anything you want to yeah that you else that you want to ask, feel free to send me an email and I can I should be able to get back to you. Um, my I have some time available, kind of like after next week, but yeah, if you want to schedule an appointment
Yeah,
to
I think I'll
talk,
do that next week probably.
yeah, that would we can there should, check the link if you
I will.
go, if you book in advance, that's always, best. It's just I next week I'm out on Monday and Tuesdays.